Live from London, this is BBC News. All eyes on Miami as Donald Trump is due to appear in court facing federal criminal charges, accused of mishandling classified documents. This is a scene live outside the courthouse in Miami.
I'm Yalda Hakim, live in Ukraine. The death toll from Russian missile strikes in central Ukraine has reached 11. Almost 30 people have been left injured.
At least 10 people in the UK. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder after 3 people were killed in Nottingham city centre. Hello, I'm Anjana Gadgil. Welcome to BBC News Now. 3 hours of fast-moving news, interviews and reaction. Donald Trump is set to make history once again as the only former president to be charged with a federal crime. He arrived in Florida on Monday night as he prepares for his court appearance later on today, where he's expected to plead not guilty to dozens of charges relating to the mishandling of classified information. On Monday evening, he was seen at a steakhouse in his hotel and resort in the Miami area, where he's staying overnight ahead of his court appearance. Our North America correspondent, Nomia Iqbal, reports from Miami.
This is MAGA territory.
Donald Trump's die-hard supporters are always ready for him.
USA! USA!
They cheered as he arrived at his resort, where he's staying before his court appearance.
We love Trump!
Once inside, he was greeted by surprised guests.
Yep, I see him. I got him in the frame. He just waved.
This is different to his indictment in New York 2 months ago, where he was charged with breaking state laws.
President Trump!
This is a federal case. The United States of America wants its former commander-in-chief on trial for allegedly jeopardizing national security.
We have one set of laws in this country, and they apply to everyone.
The Department of Justice says Trump held on to hundreds of classified documents, including ones about America's nuclear weapons and plans on how to retaliate against a foreign attack, and then refused to hand them back when asked. He denies it.
The ridiculous and baseless indictment of me by the Biden administration's weaponized Department of Injustice will go down as among the most horrific abuses of power in the history of our country.
Florida has become a Republican stronghold in recent years. But do these piling lawsuits trouble voters?
I love him and then I hate him. But then it's like he's also a realist, and I'm a realist. If he did something wrong, he will be locked up.
Prosecutors have brought the case to Florida because they want it to be heard in the place where the alleged crimes happened. It means that Donald Trump's fate could ultimately be decided by 12 citizens in a state he won twice in the last presidential elections.
So how easy will it be to find an impartial jury?
You have to find people who may have an opinion, but can set aside their opinion and focus solely on the evidence that's been submitted in the courtroom.
Could he go to jail?
He could. I mean, look, some of these charges carry a statutory maximum of 20 years.
The trial of a man running to be president again could extend into the 2024 campaign season and beyond the election. To steal one of Trump's lines, America will have never seen anything like it. Nomia Iqbal, BBC News, Miami.
Well, it's morning in Miami. Let's get some live pictures from the federal courthouse where Donald Trump is due to appear at 3 o'clock local time. That's Miami time, currently 8 o'clock in the morning. So this is the Wilkie D. Ferguson Court in Miami. The entire hearing is set to last about an hour. After that, Donald Trump will fly back to Bedminster in New Jersey. Security, we're told, will be extremely tight in and around the court. The Miami police chief has said that they'll deploy enough resources to handle a crowd of up to 50,000 people if necessary. We also know that Mr. Trump is expected to enter the building through an underground tunnel, avoiding both the anticipated crowds of supporters and, of course, counter-demonstrators and the media outside. Well, let's get a little more on this court case from Dr. Laura Smith, who joins us live from Oxford. Thank you very much for joining us, Laura. So, first of all, what is the significance of this case?
Well, we're really in uncharted territory here. I mean, the closest the U.S. has ever come to prosecuting a president and ex-president is obviously Richard Nixon, and that never came to pass, obviously, because his successor, Gerald Ford, pardoned him. Very controversial at the time, but when Gerald Ford passed away 15 to 20 years ago now, almost 20 years ago, the polls had really changed. The American public sort of looked back and said, okay, that pardon really brought America together at a time of turmoil after Watergate, after Vietnam. I think we're in a very different place, though, now in 2023. We're in a place where we've had hyper-partisanship for 30 years. It's about 1994. We're in a place where social media really drives those divisions, and it's no longer acceptable, I think, for the majority of the American public and indeed international public, if we think about our current politics in the UK as well, to not have our politicians and political leaders held to the same account.
You've studied decades of presidential history. Have we ever seen anything that comes close to this in American history?
No, not at all. This is really where it's untested. And the impact on the election is going to be really interesting. I think a lot of people are really asking and sort of hanging on their toes, really wondering what the date is going to be for this. Because, of course, we can't forget the first indictment in New York. Well, that trial is set in March. That's after Super Tuesday. And, of course, Trump's lawyers are going to argue that he needs more time after that New York trial to be able to prepare a sufficient defense. They are scrambling for lawyers. They're scrambling for defense on the Trump side right now. So that extends it closer and closer to the election. And the question as to whether how close it could be to the election, if before at all, is really up in the air.
And for Donald Trump himself, how will this affect his legacy? How defining will this case be for him?
I think that regardless of the outcome of either indictments, you said yourself that this is incredibly significant in the sense of he's looking at 37 federal criminal charges here. Anyone else in his position will probably be looking for a plea. But that's obviously not in his nature. I don't think anyone's surprised at that. So regardless of the outcome of the case, this is, unfortunately, for him, part of his legacy in terms of the fact that he is an ex-president who has been indicted twice and facing very serious criminal charges related to national security.
Laura, thank you very much for your insights. That's Dr. Laura Smith, US presidential historian at the University of Oxford. Now to Ukraine, where there's been another night of Russian missile strikes, which have left 10 people dead in the southern city of Kryvyi Rih, the hometown of President Zelensky. It comes as the country struggles to cope with the floods that were caused after the strategic Kakhovka Dam was blown up last week. Well, my colleague Yalda Hakim is in the capital, Kyiv. Yalda, what can you tell us about last night's attacks?
Well, Anjana, in the early hours of the morning, air raid sirens went off and people were pushed under the bunkers underground because of those Russian missile strikes that you've been talking about. And we know now that the death toll has risen to 11 people and almost 30 others have been injured in what you described as President Zelensky's hometown, Kryvyi Rih, in central Ukraine. Let's just show you some images of that 5-story building, which you can see emergency workers are desperately trying to put out the fire. So really, life appears to be going back to normal in certain parts of Ukraine, like the capital here, and then suddenly these airstrikes happen, and you can see the air defense systems busy at work, working away to prevent these airstrikes doing the maximum amount of damage. We also know that, or it was reported, that 2 drone strikes hit civilian infrastructure in Kharkiv, which is in the northeast of Ukraine. The Russian authorities haven't actually commented on any of this. President Volodymyr Zelensky condemned the attacks. And of course, the focus, though, very much is on the east and the south of the country because that counteroffensive continues. I spoke about the developments here in the last week or so when the counteroffensive was announced to the former Prime Minister Arseniy Yatsenyuk. Just have a listen.
As we stay on this roof, it could happen every single minute. Russians already launched around 1,000 missiles at the beginning of this, started from the beginning of this year, and more than 400 Iran-made drones. So it's a never-ending disaster, and this is the war crime committed by President Putin. But on the other hand, thanks to our Western allies and NATO member states, we are in more or less secure area due to the fact that Ukraine got superior air defense systems. But this is a huge death toll. This is a huge drama for the Ukrainian people.
Yeah, like I said, those airstrikes remind you that this is a nation at war. But when you think about what's happening in the south of the country, for example, the breach of the dam, which has left so many people devastated, we won't understand the full extent of this breach for many weeks to come. But for now, it's a major humanitarian disaster.
Absolutely. It's too early to assess the disaster that have happened already. So on the one hand, no doubt this is the war crime. This is an act of terror. On the other hand, this could have a dramatic, dreadful implications for the economy, for the human beings, for the agricultural sector, and for the entire environment. The thing is how to bring to justice Russians. And this is the milestone. This is the key thing for me. Putin has to pay the price.
Do you think he will, though?
Absolutely. Otherwise, this world will tend up and down. Because these kind of crimes that Putin committed against Ukrainians, they have to be brought to justice. And Putin, you are well aware that Putin is under ICC arrest warrant. So the time will come when he will be behind the bars.
Of course, the counteroffensive continues as well. We have heard from the Ukrainian military that they have retaken at least 7 villages. These are very small villages, though, on a very large and long front line.
Well, the fact is that we are making incremental gains. The fact is that Ukraine will liberate its territory. And I believe that one time this counteroffensive will switch to Operation Liberation of entire Ukrainian territory. This is a hard toil, a bloody one. So we need more support from our Western allies. But the good thing is that I am in constant touch with the Ukrainian military. Ukrainian men and women in the uniform have a very high morale. So we want to win. We will prevail with this kind of mood. But no doubt, this is the war. And this is a war of attrition. And it's not an easy job. So please do not exaggerate or overestimate this kind of counteroffensive. It's important to help and to support Ukraine for as long as it takes for Ukraine to prevail in this war.
And we hear that from Western leaders.
We don't hear to prevail in this war, and it makes a difference.
Yeah, we hear Western leaders. I mean, Justin Trudeau was here at the weekend. He said, however long it takes, we'll stand with Ukraine, whatever it takes. Do you believe them, though?
Absolutely, because this is the bedrock of the democracy. Ukraine is fighting for our freedom, for democracy, and actually for the entire humanity. Because everything that Russia committed, all these aggressions and war crimes that Russia did to Ukraine, this constitutes the heinous and egregious war crimes. So we are defending freedoms and values of the free world.
If the political situation changes in the US, your biggest ally and right now the biggest supporter when it comes to military and other aid?
As of now, we heavily rely on bipartisan support. But I do believe that it doesn't matter whether Democrats or Republicans, but the US is a flagship of democracy. But on the other hand, I believe that the best way out in this particular case is to provide a long-term strategy how to support Ukraine. Because, well, things can change in politics. That's the way democracy works. But we can't change our values.
What about the political situation here in Ukraine? You may or may not have an election next year?
Well, under the martial law, we can't have any elections. So the preliminary condition is to liberate Ukrainian territory. And actually, I believe that Ukraine is a flourishing democracy. But to defend this democracy, we need to win this war.
Do you think that this will become a war of attrition, where it just continues in the east?
Ongoing. No doubt. This is the war of attrition. And Putin is testing the world. Putin is testing Ukraine. Whether we have enough guts both to support Ukraine and to fight like hell. Yes, we do.
That's the former Prime Minister of Ukraine speaking to me a little earlier. Let me just bring you up to date on the situation with the Kakhovka Dam, where we know that evacuations are continuing. The United Nations says it needs to cross the front line to the left bank of the Dnipro River to help get Ukrainians who are stuck on the other side of the river, which is controlled by Russia, out to safety. Now, they say that they haven't received security guarantees yet from the Russian Federation, but they are working with the Russians to try and make that happen because, of course, people are desperately waiting to be evacuated. We will continue to bring you updates on that situation. But Anjana, I just want to give you a sense of what's happening in the capital, Kyiv, here today. As I said, it was under attack overnight, and yet you can see the people are out and about in the streets. The metro entrance is just over there where you can see the Ukrainian flag. Restaurants are full, cafes are buzzing, people are getting out and about, trying to get on with their daily lives. So you wouldn't think that the majority of these people were under bunkers last night trying to escape Russian missile strikes. And of course, as we know, the death toll has increased in central Ukraine. But here in the capital, Kyiv, people are trying to be as resilient as possible. Anjana, back to you.
Yalda, thank you very much. We can hear some lovely music behind you as well. That's BBC's Yalda Hakim in Kyiv, and more from Yalda throughout the day. Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
Bringing you different stories from across the UK.
John Evans has built up his award-winning business here at Weeping Cross in Stafford.
We've just had to renew our gas. Our per annum spend in 5 days' time will go from 10,000 per annum to 22,000.
Alex Allday is also feeling the pinch. She set up her ceramics company 7 years ago.
Really had to look at how many firings I'm doing a month, if I can cut those down in any way.
The government announced a new energy bills discount scheme lasting until April 2024 for eligible non-domestic customers. The trouble is, many businesses don't fit the criteria.
Some businesses that are not within the designated codes of being, energy intensive users, but are using a huge amount of energy, don't get the advanced support that others are getting.
For more stories from across the UK, head to the BBC News website.
You're live with BBC News. The public inquiry into the UK government's handling of the coronavirus pandemic is holding its first public hearing today. COVID has been included on the death certificates of more than 225,000 people in the UK. The inquiry, launched by Boris Johnson in 2021, will cover government decision-making. There's no formal deadline, but it's due to hold public hearings until 2026. The inquiry's work is split into 6 parts. The first are resilience and preparedness, core UK decision-making and political governance, and the impact of COVID on healthcare systems. The next, with hearings in 2024 and 2025, are vaccines, therapeutics and antiviral treatment, the UK care sector and government procurement. The session began with the chair, Lady Hallett, saying the inquiry will be a huge task.
Good morning and welcome to the first day of the main hearings of the COVID-19 UK public inquiry. I shall start by hearing opening submissions from Council to the inquiry and from the call participants, and then evidence in Module 1 covering resilience and preparedness for the pandemic. As people arrived at the hearing centre today, they found a dignified vigil of bereaved family members holding photographs of their loved ones. Their grief was obvious to all. It is on their behalf and on behalf of the millions who suffered and continue to suffer in different ways as a result of the pandemic that I intend to answer the following 3 questions. Was the UK properly prepared for a pandemic? Was the response to it appropriate? And can we learn lessons for the future?
Our health correspondent, Catherine Burns, brought us the latest from the inquiry.
Do you know, it's been a really emotional morning. I've been here for about 6 hours now, and even hours before people arrived, there was a line of bereaved families there waiting outside the door, doing that vigil that Lady Hallett spoke about. I spoke to some of these people and their stories are heartbreaking. You know, one man described to me how he lost his mum and dad within 15 days of each other. Another woman, I started speaking to her and she just teared up. She said, I can't talk, but it's so important for me to be here. Then once things got underway, just after Lady Hallett spoke, they played a 17-minute video. Do you know, it was so many people all telling their individual version of the same story, how their loved ones got sick, how they said goodbye to them, often as they went off in ambulances. Then they waited for hospitals to give them news until finally they got the call that they weren't going to make it. Do you know, I'm just going to read out to you some of the quotes that really stood out to me on this. One woman said, I was told, your mum just passed away. Another said, he died alone. Another, I could imagine my mummy alone. And then I'm on my own now. I didn't have anybody. One person said, my grief was compounded by the absence of comfort. Because obviously once people's families had died, then they had to deal with socially distanced funerals. They couldn't get hugs. That emotion was the key part of the beginning of this. But then the focus has moved on and we've started hearing from the inquiry's lawyer. He's preparing us for Module 1, pandemic preparedness. He's asked a lot of questions. Essentially, was the UK ready for this? Did they do enough to prepare?
So on day one, Catherine, you've talked us through what happened this morning and the emotional tributes that were paid to some of the victims there. What are we expecting to happen this afternoon?
We're expecting to hear a little bit more from the lead counsel for the inquiry and then the core participants, as they're called. So this is key players. Their lawyers will get to stand up and speak. So these key players will be the bereaved families. It will also be government departments and other experts. Really, tomorrow afternoon is when we're expecting the evidence to start. So this week we're going to hear from public health officials, we're going to hear experts, professors, epidemiologists, but also from civil servants who were in charge at some stages of running how the UK coped with emergencies. And then what I think is over the next week or 2 weeks, we're going to hear from former prime ministers, former health secretaries, and they're going to be asked, what did you do to make sure that the UK was ready for this?
So that's Catherine Burns outside the inquiry. Let's go live now to Amitava Banerjee, who's a Professor of Clinical Data Science at University College London. Thank you very much for joining us. First of all, in your opinion, how prepared was the UK for COVID-19 and the pandemic?
I think that in some areas we were prepared, that we had good data that we were able to use. If you remember, when the briefings were happening, we were able to mobilise data and mobilise the research community in a way that many other countries could not. However, did we move quickly enough on the basis of this data? Did we use all of the learnings from previous exercises? I think that's what the inquiry is finding out, and I'd say on some of those respects, we weren't prepared enough.
Now, you've looked in great detail at the indirect effects of COVID. What are the indirects of COVID, and how much attention was paid to them?
Thank you. Indirect effects means those effects on the individuals and populations and health systems which are not due to, say, hospitalisation with COVID or mortality from COVID, but due to the effect that such a large-scale event like the pandemic had on other non-COVID healthcare, such as cancer care or operations for cardiovascular disease or GP appointments. And all of those effects have been major over the last 3 years, particularly in the first wave prior to vaccination. And you know, we're still recovering from those insults to the health system at this point. And to answer your question, I think those indirect effects traditionally in pandemic preparedness have not been taken into account.
So what does the government need to learn from the past 3 years?
I think that pandemic preparedness traditionally has been focused on infectious disease. What we've seen is, of course, the main insult is infectious disease, but the wider determinants are affected by non-communicable or chronic diseases such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, cancer, and prevention of those is important not just in the acute pandemic but going forward. And we need to think about how we preserve those services and the staffing levels in those non-COVID services so that we don't have this long tail of the pandemic. And I'd also just add that we didn't know, but we know now and have known for at least 3 years about long COVID, the chronic effects of the pandemic. And I think we need to pay more attention in future to the potential effect on individuals and health systems because of large-scale effects of long COVID.
Amitava, thank you very much for joining us. That's Amitava Banerjee, who's Professor of Clinical Data Science at the University College London. Some sports news now, and the French football superstar Kylian Mbappe has written to his club Paris Saint-Germain saying he won't be signing a new contract. With his current deal set to expire next June, it appears likely that he will be sold this year, with the French champions keen to avoid losing their star asset on a free transfer. In basketball, the Denver Nuggets have captured their first title in 47 NBA seasons after defeating the Miami Heat 94-89.
It's over! At last!
The Nuggets won the best-of-7 NBA Finals 4-1. Nikola Jokic was named the Finals' most valuable player.
Hello there. We've got a few changes to come in the next few days across some parts of Europe. Now, in the northwest, across Scandinavia and the Baltic states, we're still dominated by high pressure. It's dry, it's sunny, and it's on the hot side as well. But this low pressure has been developing here in western parts of the Mediterranean. That's going to push its way into central areas, taking with it some very heavy rain and thunderstorms, but introducing some drier weather for southern France and Iberia. Where we have these downpours across the east and southeast of Europe, it's still on the cool side. There will be some sunshine around as well, but it looks very wet across many parts of Italy that could lead to some flooding. But by contrast, it's turning drier. It's getting warmer, actually, across much of Spain and across southern France. The downpours are receding. Still got the sunshine across many northern parts of Europe, but there are some showers moving through Poland. They'll still be there perhaps in northern parts of the country on Thursday, and those could head towards Germany as well. But this is where the main rain is, moving into the southern half of Italy, heading towards the Balkans, over towards Greece, Bulgaria and Romania, and those temperatures continuing to rise in Spain and in southern France. We've got a few more days of dry weather and sunshine to come in London and Paris. Those temperatures may be rising over 30 degrees in Paris and getting hotter, I think, in Madrid. The rain in Rome shouldn't last too much longer. The weekend looking much more promising. But by then, we've got the thunderstorms arriving in Athens as the wet weather moves its way eventually from the Balkans.
They were all yellow. I came along, I wrote a song for you, and it was called Yellow. Your skin, oh yeah, your skin and bones, turning to something beautiful.
Working together for a more sustainable world tour. DHL and Coldplay.
Now showing on BBC Real.
If you look at the style of the construction of the fort, it's a totally ingenious construction with the walls stretching right up to the edges, the entry gate not at all visible from a great distance. And even after the gate is visible, it's very difficult to deboard from a boat. It has numerous bastions, each with numerous cannons, some of them huge. So that makes it ingenious. That is one of the reasons why it is also an unconquered fort.
Watch more stories like this at bbc.com/real.
Whoa! There is art all over Istanbul, but this has to be the strangest of all.
Music is such an important tool in our lives, not just to bring pleasure, but also to heal and to bring hope. We're just in a period now that African brands are just owning that, owning what we have and projecting it in however they see fit.
I just love this place because this is somewhere where memory itself is set in stone.
Inspiring arts and culture on BBC News.
This is BBC News, the headlines. The former US President Donald Trump is due to appear in a Miami courtroom to face federal criminal charges, accused of mishandling classified documents. Well, this is a scene now outside the courthouse in Miami. EU lawmakers debate tougher rules for artificial intelligence. These are live pictures from the European Parliament. Donald Trump is set to make history once again as the only former president to be charged with a federal crime. These are live pictures from the Wilkie Ferguson courthouse in downtown Miami. Security's tight as police prepare for potentially thousands of people to rally in support of the former US president. The mayor of Miami has called for peaceful protests when Mr. Trump makes his appearance in court. He's due in court at around 3 o'clock local time in Miami. The CBS correspondent Christian Benavides has the latest from Miami.
Mr. Trump is expected to be in court at 3 p.m., but his supporters are anticipated to be here much earlier than that. Still, Miami officials say they are prepared for the crowds, whether large or small. The chief of Miami police saying that they're prepared to handle anywhere between 5,000 to upwards of 50,000 people that could potentially show up here. Now, having said that, and while there is concern for security, keep this in mind. We've got local law enforcement here. We've got federal law enforcement here. On top of that, we've got the Secret Service. So the real X factor here is the weather. This is South Florida, and there is the potential for rain between 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. and how that could potentially affect the crowds.
So how much will we see of Donald Trump today, Christian?
Well, look, earlier in the day, it's really quite unclear. His Doral Golf Resort is about 20 minutes away from downtown. Now, when he does get here, he's going to be in a parking lot and taken through an underground tunnel in order to get into the courthouse. That's when he's going to be processed. But it's going to look a little different because he is a high-profile defendant. Don't expect any handcuffs and also no mugshot. Now, remember, all of this was already coordinated between the Secret Service and the federal police here at the courthouse.
So what happens after today's hearing?
Well, look, however it is that this case plays out, we know that this is having a big impact in 2024. You just have to look at the polling. However it is that this legally works out for him, it is helping him politically. Latest poll for the GOP primary has Mr. Trump at 61%.
Dr. Steve Hurst, a US politics expert at Manchester Metropolitan University, has more about the political significance of this indictment.
I mean, in some senses, it doesn't change that much. Right? He's already been indicted on state charges in New York. There are other cases coming up in Georgia. So this isn't, in a sense, it's not like the first set of charges where that was a new qualitative change. This is a kind of incremental change. It adds another set of charges he's facing, but politically speaking, in the short term, it's probably doing him some favors because it makes it very, very difficult for his political opponents within the Republican Party. And clearly there are people in the Republican Party who would very much like him not to be their candidate in 2024. It makes it much harder for those people to oppose him because it's, in this polarized context, it looks as though you're siding with the Democrats. So, even Ron DeSantis, who clearly, wants to beat Trump for the nomination, is having to line up and say this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. So it helps him in terms of winning the nomination. For sure, it makes it much harder for his opponents. I think some of his opponents in the Republican Party would quite like the charges to go away because it would make them easier for them not to nominate him.
Yes, it's highly politicised and highly polarising, as you say. Will it change the minds of anybody in the US, or have people already decided whether they're pro-Trump or anti-Trump?
I think, for the vast majority of people, this is all priced in by this point. Those people, as you say, it's highly polarised. There are very few swing voters left in American elections. The vast majority of Republicans vote Republican, the vast majority of Democrats vote Democrat, and they will vote that way regardless. That said, there are still, swing voters. Election results change. It's not the case that one party wins all the time. The elections are very close, and there is a minority, a small minority of voters, perhaps 5 to 10% at most, who will shift their opinions and will change their vote from one election to another. I don't think this helps Trump with those voters at all. I think his hardcore will vote for him regardless of what he does. But those people who are genuine swing voters, who are more moderate, who look at the bigger picture, who aren't just partisan loyalists, will look at this and say, do we really want to elect a guy who might end up in jail or who's going to be in trial when he's supposed to be being president? And I think their answer is going to be no. We aren't going to vote for that guy. So it doesn't help him in the long run. It helps in the short term. I think it doesn't help him in the long run.
Well, we can see some pictures now of the federal courthouse in downtown Miami, where Donald Trump will be making an appearance this afternoon local time. It's the Wilkie D. Ferguson Court, and we've been told that security will be extremely tight, and Mr. Trump is expected to enter the building through an underground tunnel to avoid the crowds that are expected to gather outside. And on that, let's go to our correspondent Gary O'Donoghue, who's outside the courthouse. What's the atmosphere there at the moment, Gary?
Well, it's a few hours until the former president arrives here, and there's probably a lot more media than there is anything else right at the moment. So as you say, he's staying at his golf club about half an hour away from here, and he'll drive to this courthouse ahead of this 3 o'clock appearance. And there's an underground car park, we understand. He'll be processed inside this building, taken to the top floor, where he'll go before a judge and he'll enter a plea to the charges that will be read out to him.
So the Miami police chief has said that they've got security in place to handle a crowd of up to 50,000 people. Are you expecting to see those sorts of numbers?
I mean, we'll see. There wasn't those kind of numbers in New York when the president had his last arraignment just a couple of months ago, but Florida is very different to New York in terms of its political complexion. They are saying they're prepared for that kind of number. There have certainly been a few protesters around the various golf clubs around here when he arrived yesterday, but not all that many, and frankly there weren't that many in New York. So we'll see what happens. The police department says it's prepared. There are various branches of law enforcement. They put some barriers up, some plastic yellow barriers and tape, and we'll see who turns up at the end of the day.
Gary, the hearing itself is supposed to last around an hour. What are you expecting to take place during that time? I understand also no cameras are allowed inside that courthouse.
No cameras, no phones, nothing like that whatsoever. He'll be fingerprinted, he'll be processed. As I say, he'll be taken to the top floor. The charges will be read to him, he'll enter a plea. So it's really a very formal process, a formal legal process. After that, he'll leave the courthouse and fly straight back to New Jersey to another one of his golf clubs up there, and he'll make a statement in the evening at about 8:15. So that's when the politics gets underway, and the former president will hope to raise money like he did last time over this arraignment and galvanise his supporters.
Of course, this is actually just the beginning, really, of a legal process. What takes place after this hearing?
Well, there'll be various court hearings. I mean, I think his legal team will try and put in a motion to have the case dismissed. We know that the president, in his legal dealings in his previous life, has done everything to delay the process. There's no reason to believe he wouldn't do that again this time. But the special counsel who's running this whole process says he wants a speedy trial. Florida is known for pretty rapid trials, so we'll see. But we don't have any kind of timing as to when it would come to court. But it's going to be bang in the middle, probably, of the Republican nomination race.
Gary, thank you. That's Gary O'Donoghue, our North America correspondent in Miami. In the UK, 3 people have been killed in Nottingham city centre in the East Midlands. Police say they found 2 people dead in Ilkeston Road just after 4 a.m, where another man was also found dead a short distance away. A 31-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of murder. Officers say they believe the incidents are linked, but stressed investigations are at a very early stage. Hayley Compton from BBC Radio Nottingham sent the latest.
So I'm in an incredibly iconic area of the city. Just behind me is the Theatre Royal, the big pillars. People will recognise if they've ever come to the theatre here. And of course people do come to the theatre in Nottingham because it is the centre of the country. But it's a really strange situation here this morning where these streets would be really busy with people shopping, making their way into college and work. There's these police cordons across the city. This is just one location where you see the blue and white tape. Just in front of me is a completely stopped tram. It's empty. There's police tape in front of the tram. All of the trams in the city have been stopped because of this major incident. Now, when I was speaking to some of the police that have arrived here this morning, they said that they've been here from 5 o'clock. We know now that the police were called at 4 a.m. to an incident where 2 people were found dead. There's another person that's also been found dead as well. And then a separate incident where a van was seen driving into pedestrians. Now, the police say they have arrested a 31-year-old man, but there is still a huge police presence in the city. In fact, just behind me, I'm sure you can see a couple of police cars. They were blocking off the roads this morning, and people all around the city just trying to make sense of it all. It's a really strange thing to wake up to. It's a beautiful sunny day, and people coming into the city are just trying to make their way through the city centre and discovering this, and people are wanting to find out what's happened and why it's happened to a city that they know and love.
Hayley Compton on the scene in Nottingham. It's still not clear how events unfolded. The BBC Verify team have been working to piece it together. Here's Courtney Bembridge to take us through it.
These are the scenes people in Nottingham woke up to this morning. Police lights flashing and cars filling the street. Around 4 o'clock in the morning, the call came in to say 2 people had been found dead in the street. Now, to give you an idea of where that incident took place in relation to the rest of the city, that is marked here. So 2 people found dead on Ilkeston Road. And we've got 3 other areas that we're going to focus on, including where people were injured, another man was found dead, and also where the 31-year-old man was arrested. So let's have a look at those in a bit more detail. First of all, we've got the area heading into the city where 2 people were found dead. This is a major road heading into the city centre. It's a mix of houses and businesses. And once we get into the city centre is where the second incident is believed to have taken place. So this is Milton Street. It's a very pedestrian-friendly area, a large shopping centre here. And this is where a van is believed to have hit 3 people who are currently in hospital. Then we've also got large parts of the city here cordoned off at the moment with police investigating. And then we have a third incident at Magdala Road, which is to the north. So 3 separate incidents, but police are very much treating them as part of the same incident. But as you can see, they're spread across the city and the distances between these are about 10 minutes by car. But police are still trying to work out exactly what happened and build a complex timeline of how it all unfolded.
Around the world and across the UK, this is BBC News.
To choose Grana Padano is to embrace its unique Italian values. A moment to be shared. Grana Padano, an Italian feeling.
This programme asks plain questions with the help of the unrivalled range of BBC journalists right across the world. And gathered here in this building, I'll also draw on my time reporting on global conflict. Frontline experience that helps me know who to talk to and who to listen to, meaning our analysis is unbiased with absolutely no spin.
Unspun World on BBC News.
As fighting continues in Ukraine, join our team for the latest developments.
There's now a massive effort to rebuild what's been destroyed, but what happened here will never be forgotten.
See the headlines as they happen with breaking news alerts in the app and get the full story with bbc.com/news. Follow the story for all the latest with BBC News.
You're live with BBC News. Young people in Palestine say they're losing hope in the political process and the idea of a two-state solution, citing the lack of progress and leadership. Nawal Al-Maghafi has this special report.
Samar Hasboun is a 28-year-old photographer. She's grown up in Bethlehem in the occupied Palestinian territories, but has never had the chance to vote in a general election.
I don't feel I have the freedom of self-expression in the political sphere. Our basic rights are violated from the occupation forces. So why are we also experiencing a similar violence from what is supposed to be our own leadership?
Exclusive data shared with the BBC has tracked the changing views of 18 to 29-year-old Palestinians over the last decade. It suggests this generation shows a growing trend of dissatisfaction for their own leadership.
The youth discontent is driven to a large extent by, one, the lack of legitimacy that they see in the political system without elections since 2006. So we have a president who, for the last 14 years, has been ruling without electoral legitimacy.
It's 2 a.m. in the Jenin refugee camp, and members of the Jenin Brigade are conducting training exercises. Mostly men in their 20s, these fighters are independent of known militant groups and have publicly rejected links to political parties in their country.
The youth of Palestine have lost hope with the political process of the last 30 years. Young people today go towards death because they believe it gives them a rest.
Many Palestinians, like Majd, who were born inside the border of Israel, find themselves excluded from being part of the Palestinian system.
I'm not recognized as part of the Palestinian system in the West Bank. I'm not supposed to vote. Actually, according to Israeli law, I'm not even supposed to be here.
The two-state solution is the internationally backed formula for peace, envisaging an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel. But the PSR data shows a dramatic decline in support for this, with least support amongst young Palestinians.
The two-state solution is really, it's a corpse of a political project. It's not about a state, if you ask me. Because a 5-year-old can take a look at the map and tell you that this doesn't work.
I'm tired of these questions. They all ring the same to me, and they've been asked for so many years, and they've not brought change. And I think it's time to change the questions.
Questions that this generation are already asking. Nawal Al-Maghafi, BBC News.
Let's take you to Strasbourg now, as members of the European Parliament are debating the Artificial Intelligence Act. It's a proposal that would govern the use of artificial intelligence. It wouldn't actually come into force until 2025, but the move comes after warnings from experts of serious risks and consequences if AI continues to go unregulated. Here's Simi Joloasso with more.
Artificial intelligence has been in the news a lot lately, whether it's students using apps like ChatGPT to write up essays, or medical experts using AI tools to advance research on cancer. But then there are also those AI-generated photos, videos and music making the rounds, and those have sparked concerns around copyright and also around the spread of disinformation. So lawmakers, specifically in Europe, have decided to do something about it, introducing the Artificial Intelligence Act. Members of the European Parliament want to make sure AI is safe, transparent, traceable, non-discriminatory and environmentally friendly. And if approved, it will be the first of its kind in the world. The idea is to govern the use of AI based on 3 levels of risk, starting with unacceptable risk. That is, when AI is used for things deemed so unethical, such as biometric surveillance, or even using it to keep some kind of social scores on people. Think Netflix's Black Mirror. Next is high risk, so things that might cause harm to people's health, harm to the environment, or affect people's fundamental rights. For example, an AI tool that scans CVs in order to rank job applicants, which is fine, as long as it abides by certain rules. For example, it doesn't discriminate against applicants based on their race, age, or gender. Next are AI apps and tools that aren't banned and don't pose any high risk. So when will this AI Act become law? Well, it might still take some time. The European Parliament are set to vote on the current draft in June, and even then, it will only become law once both the European Parliament and the European Council have agreed on it.
Simi Geloso with that report. The award ceremony, the Golden Globes and the Hollywood Foreign Press Association will walk different paths from now on. The Hollywood Foreign Press Association has sold the prestigious awards to a television production company and will shut down after that. In the past few years, the association has faced multiple controversies with allegations of racism, sexism and conflicts of interest. And before we go, 16 southern white rhinos have been released in the Democratic Republic of Congo in an attempt to reintroduce the endangered species. They were transported from a private reserve in South Africa to the Garamba National Park in northeastern Congo.
The Travel Show, sponsored by Turkish Airlines.
So that right there is an electrically powered aeroplane, and this is the Green Flight Academy, one of the world's most sustainable flight schools. Do you want a hand?
No, thank you.
Well, they obviously don't trust me with such high-end gear. It's fine.
Well, someone who is trusted with this costly tech is the school's head of training, Johan.
Johan, hello.
Hi, welcome to Green Flight Academy.
Oh, thank you. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So, these are the planes?
Yeah, here they are.
They were a lot smaller than I thought they were going to be.
Yeah.
Tiny. How did you get involved in this project?
With my background in aviation industry, and then I'm a bachelor in electrical and computer engineering, so I'm all about technology and electronics. Then it was sort of a once-in-a-lifetime thing for me, and a lot of people thought I was completely crazy trying to set up a brand new flight school and doing it with new things, new gadgets that no one's tried before. And here we are, and we're up and running, and it's working.
What's the kind of ultimate aim? What are you trying to achieve here?
Well, we're just trying to change the flight training scene. So, I mean, we love traveling, I love traveling, and we need to be able to connect people, and we shouldn't stop flying, we should fly more, but we need to do it in a sustainable way so we take care of the planet as well.
What is the difference between learning to fly in an electric plane versus a conventional plane?
Well, essentially there is no difference because the flight controls work the same, the instruments are the same, it's just the handling of the engine that's a little bit different. So at the end of the day, you're going to be a first officer and have the same commercial pilot license anyway.
And what kind of students come here? Where do they come from?
They come from all over the place. We have students mainly from Europe, but then we have a student from Australia and Canadian as well. So, and they sort of all have one thing in common, is that they're in their 20s. They grew up in a sort of society changing to being sustainable.
So this is a pretty exciting moment as I'm about to hit the skies. It's definitely fully charged.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah?
100%.
Okay. You hope so? Oh, reassuring words there, Johan.
Oh,
all
yeah.
right, should we get in?
Let's do it.
Ooh. Oh, it's cozy. I can't believe we're about to go up in the air. I've never been in a plane this small before. So this is freaking me out a little bit.
10, clear takeoff 7 on board. Okay.
Ready?
Ready. Oh, I'm being a little wimp. I'm being a wimp now. It's turbulence. I need to get over it. Oh, I'd love to give it a go. As long as you should trust me. This isn't quite the flight sim. This is the real thing. We are turning. It's so sensitive. One wrong move, it could be a game over. This has to be, without a doubt, one of the funniest things I think I've ever done. Oh, coming into land. Oh, yeah. Amazing. We made it back, and my adrenaline is running really high.
Good job.
Good job.
The Travel Show, your essential guide wherever you're heading. Every weekend on BBC News.
The Travel Show, sponsored by Turkish Airlines.
Hello there, let's head to North America first of all. We should see the fire risk in Canada reducing, mainly because we've got some rain pushing its way northwards into more of Quebec, some rain also for New England. We've also got a band of rain moving across British Columbia heading towards Alberta. Fewer showers over the Rockies on Wednesday, still a zone of heavy thundery downpours, particularly towards the southeast. There could be some severe storms here as well. Looks dry for much of Mexico and on the hot side as well, but there's more rain coming in from the Caribbean into Central America. Looks drier in Cuba, a few showers across Hispaniola and a dry day or two likely for the Bahamas. Most of the heavy rain in South America is towards the northwest once again, but this rain can be quite heavy as it pushes through Bolivia, heads its way down into southern parts of Brazil. Quite cool here, and whilst it's drier through Paraguay, Uruguay and Argentina, temperatures are also on the low side. It's going to be quite hot still across northwestern parts of Europe through Scandinavia and the Baltic states as well. We're seeing a few more showers for eastern areas of Europe, but the really heavy rain is moving into central parts of the Mediterranean, particularly across towards Italy. It does mean temperatures will be rising as it gets drier across southern parts of France and across much of Spain. But the same heavy thundery showers will be affecting Tunisia on Wednesday. These are the main seasonal rains, much more active in Central Africa and around the Gulf of Guinea. Head further south across Africa, a lot of dry weather. Quite cool though, I think, in South Africa, and it's along the south coast that we'll see some wet and windy weather at times. Now, it's looking generally dry across the Middle East. However, in the next few days, we're going to find this strengthening shamal picking up, and that's going to bring some blowing dust. Now, out in the Arabian Sea, this is where we find Cyclone Biparjoy. It's going to be making landfall on Thursday. In Gujarat, some significant storm surge, heavy rain and some very strong winds. Ahead of that on Wednesday, some extreme heat warnings still across some eastern areas of India. Some sunshine and some showers again on Wednesday across Japan, the Korean Peninsula. It's turning dry and also getting hotter across northern parts of China. Further south across the country, the rains are still there. And we've got some widespread heavy thundery downpours across Southeast Asia, particularly wet around Myanmar, and more rain to come from northern parts of Indonesia as well as the Philippines. Most of Australia staying dry again on Wednesday. In the next few days, we'll see these bands of rain moving through the bight, heading into the southeast, so some more wet weather here later on in the week. At the moment, though, it's still dry in New Zealand with some sunshine, more unsettled, though, by the end of the week.